Welcome, dear viewer. I'm your host, Carmila. We are now entering the spookiest month of them all. To keep the spirits alive, I gift you my offering. Now, turn off your lights, relax, and enjoy. It was beautiful. Its antlers glittered with fresh snow, reflecting the moonlight on its watery surface. The deer stood silently in a small opening in the forest. I had gone on one of my nighttime walks through the trails behind my house, looking to kill some energy and time before I fell asleep. It was well past midnight, the trees casting pitch-black shadows as the light of the stars punched off every single branch. I'd always had a connection with nature, but this was my first time seeing a creature of this status up close. It was truly majestic and like nothing I had seen before. My house sat on the border of a deep forest leading out into the Canadian wilderness. I'd been careful not to venture too far from home, but the wandering of my mind would truly decide the path I took each night. It began to slowly walk away from me, deeper into the forest. The snow crunched beneath its hooves, imitating the noise of your head hitting the pillow before you slept. Although it was such a simple creature, even the mundane things like the way it walked were fascinating. I followed closely behind, as it led me into the secrets of the night forest ahead. As it moved further, everything around me appeared to fall completely silent. The wind was a standstill, the only noise coming from the snow below us. It began to quicken the pace, almost as if it were jogging to its destination. I kept my pace equal, walking roughly 10 feet behind it. Suddenly, it had stopped in its track. I stopped moving to mirror it, fearing for my safety next. The deer was so beautiful that I had stopped thinking about my surroundings and safety entirely. It seemed that I had walked almost 30 minutes straight into the forest, with only the footprints I left behind, quickly being filled with falling snow. The deer stopped to look at me, matching my gaze as I stood cautiously, trying to appear as passive as possible. After a moment of pure silence, the deer quickly dashed to my left, disappearing into the night forest. It had clearly been started by me. Oh, so I thought. I was alone, surrounded by the white glow of snow and the dark overhang of the pine trees above. I began my walk back to my house. I heard it. A soft but piercing screech filled the area around me. It sounded as if it were deeper in the forest, but I knew better. Whatever had made the noise was very close to my current standing. I picked up the pace as I jogged back, suddenly stopping in my tracks. The deer stood in the middle of the path in front of me. I had no intention of disturbing it, and surely didn't want to find out what a cornered deer can do with large antlers. It stared at me with some form of intensity in its eyes, almost if it were trying to anticipate my next move. I began to slowly back away until I'd realized why it had been staring at me. I turned around, only to find that another deer stood behind me. It was identical to the one in front of me, with each and every detail in the same place. The spots were the same sizes and angles, the antlers had the same blank patterning. The high-pitched screeching began again, filling the area with the awful noise. The deer behind me was the source. The deer in front of me ran, disappearing yet again into the snowy forest. But it was most definitely not a deer. I turned to face it, watching in horror as the transformation began. Its bone and skin began to contort and move out of place, the brown fur rotting down to a pale, leather-like layer of paper-thin skin. Its eyes turned red, elevating with the rest of its body as it stood on its hind legs. The bones crackled as they restricted the skin, stretching every inch with noises like fabric tearing. It was most definitely not a deer. The pale creature stood before me, its rib cage holding the pale untextured skin out of its shoulders. Those eyes, they were unlike anything I'd seen before, radiating through terror. I backed away slowly as it opened its human-like jaw, letting out a screech like the ones before. It was hunched over, slowly approaching me as I moved. It dropped back to all fours, readying itself to attack. I ran into the trees, hoping to lose it with a game of life or death tag. I ran like I hadn't before, the snow flying off my shoes as I moved through the trees. I ran until I couldn't, and then kept running. I couldn't hear it following closely behind, the leaves shaking as it reached for me. I felt it swing at me back, tearing my skin with a sharp slash. It didn't stop running. My adrenaline carried me into my backyard. The noises behind me stopped as I stepped into my backyard light, disappearing into the infinite darkness. I had collapsed at my back door from blood loss and pure shock. Luckily, my wife had discovered me merely 30 minutes after I had passed out. She called an ambulance and demanded I tell her what happened. I don't know what it was, but I'm not exactly eager to find out. I told her and my family that I had fallen down a hill and scraped my back poorly. It raised some eyebrows, but I refused to share the horrors of that night, and I most definitely refused to go on another late night walk. I just wanted to give my thanks to for letting me use their story to narrate, and I'll see you all tomorrow.